morning. This is the beginning of the lecture series, the Introduction to Culture Studies for the students of the first year of the Institute of English Studies at the University of Warsaw. And before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping, because the lecture series is going to be uploaded, recorded and uploaded in this form. So you will get new episodes, new lectures every week. So for the entire semester, I will send you via USOS mail. If you are registered in USOS mail, you're getting the message over to your email. So I will send you an email message via USOS mail before each Monday, so you can watch the lectures as they happen, as they are uploaded. They will not be taken down, so if for some reason you don't see them in the week when they are uploaded, don't worry. You can watch them later, you can watch them again. The reason why this whole series is uploaded and it's not done live at the Institute is mostly because this was the formula that we came up with during the pandemic, and it kind of worked, so we decided to keep it. And because the lectures are not obligatory, you do not have to attend them, you do not even have to watch the videos. The only thing that you need to do if you want to get the grade is to pass the final test. And we will talk about it later on in the semester. We have not yet decided at the Institute whether it will be live in class or it will be online as well. So basically just bear in mind that if you want the grade, there will be a final test at the end. That's the only requirement. You do not even have to watch the videos. Also, the videos are not the only material that you can find concerning this lecture series. If you are registered to Moodle, you can find the Moodle group online. It is called Lecture Introduction to Culture Studies. I will send you the link via USOS mail, and there you will have additional materials like all the presentations, all the slides that I will be using during my lectures. Also, short assessment, self-assessment quizzes. They are not graded. You can take them just to recapitulate if you wish. You can retake them. Nobody will really grade your mistakes or assess your mistakes. It's just for your own comfort, for your own self-assessment. That's just purely for you. The only graded test is the final test, which will be at the end of the semester. Also, you have most of the recommended reading uploaded as ebooks to the Moodle page. This is again not obligatory. This is just in case you get interested and you want some more information. This is where you can find it. So some books are here, like Jerry Moore's Visions of Culture, the big work with multiple authors called Cultural Anthropology, The Human Challenge, Thomas Erickson, Small Places, Large Issues, a very interesting, quite funny book by Kate Fox called Watching the English, about the sociology, anthropology of the British people, and also a rather famous work by Yuval Harari, *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind*. So these are the books. This is not, of course, the exhaustive list. If you want more, we can talk about it if you are interested. Also, you will find on the Moodle page the forum sections with some additional materials, like the link to the lecture series by Yuval Harari. So if you would prefer to watch his cycle of lectures rather than read *Sapiens*, that's another possibility. There are also some forum sections in which you can ask questions. Another possibility, if you would really like to discuss something or to ask a question or to clarify, you can come to my office hours, which you can find at the Institute webpage. I know they will be on Mondays, probably around noontime. So if you want to meet me in person, if you want to talk about anything, just come to my office hours. It's part of your studying process. It's nothing out of the ordinary. You're not at school anymore. Nothing is obligatory. It's just, we are just here for you to help you in the pursuit of knowledge. So that's basically it. If you would like to know what's in plan for the semester, go to the Moodle page. You will see the titles of the topics for the weeks. They might be a little bit changed during the semester because this year actually the lecture series has more hours than in the previous few years. So rather than 15 hours, we have 30 hours. So hopefully there will be time for everything. So generally what I will start with today in a little moment is the basic concepts of nature, culture, the duality of nature versus culture, of culture versus civilization. Are these synonyms? Do these things mean the same, or rather something different? We'll talk a little bit about the dictionary meaning of culture, the different definitions of culture, the different understanding of culture, what constitutes culture, how is culture characterized. We'll talk about some very basic issues like learning culture and transmission of culture. So that's for this week. Then for 1 or probably even 2 weeks, we'll talk about anthropology and studying human society from a historical perspective. So there will be a quick historical overview of the most important scholars and schools of anthropology, and also the division of different types of studies that deal with humans and human social behavior. Then we will talk probably for 3 weeks or something about material culture. We'll talk about art. We'll talk about different aspects of popular culture, daily life that refer to material culture, especially clothing and food. Then we'll talk about the body, the importance of the human body and the cultural treatment of the human body, including the questions of gender differences and, of course, again, cultural rather than biological responses to these differences. The next rather big issue is the concepts of family, marriage, parenthood, so very personal or intimate aspects of human social behavior. Then we'll talk about magic, mythology and religion, so spiritual aspects of human behavior, especially in the social sense. Then we'll talk about power, politics and government, that is social, political, to some extent perhaps economical aspects of human social behavior. We will then move to discussing the concept of modernity. When does modernity start in culture studies and literature studies? What are the main features of modernity? What is the difference of modernity versus post-modernity? We'll talk about quite a lot of different scholars, philosophers, linguists, literature scholars that dealt with different issues concerning modernity. And towards the end of the semester, we'll talk about two rather big issues that permeate discussion of modern aspects of culture or even contemporary, very recent aspects of culture. One is the legacy of the imperial past of Great Britain, so post-imperialism, especially as a trend in culture and literature studies, and then eco-criticism. So we'll start with nature versus culture, and we'll basically go back to the concepts of nature and culture, nature and literature, the responses of culture towards nature in the recent works through eco-criticism. So a little bit about myself. If you're here, you probably know my name is Dorota Babilas, and I work at the section of the Institute called the British Culture section. So I'm interested in British history, art, culture, literature, mostly literature, although we are not going to spend a lot of time talking about literature here. How I see this lecture cycle is really a kind of additional helpful information that will make it easier for you to approach literature, perhaps also language, during the course of your studies. That is why there will be a lot of discussion of different scholars. There will be a lot of name dropping. If you are already familiar with some of the names, like the big names, like, I don't know, Sigmund Freud or Karl Marx, great. This will be another opportunity to hear about them. If you are not familiar, don't worry, you will definitely approach these scholars again, probably more than once during the course of your studies. So this is just an introduction, just to familiarize you with some names, with some schools of thought, with some concepts that are very basic for the study of culture, and of course literature, philology are very important parts of culture. So my personal interests are mostly situated around the 19th century, the Victorian period, the Gothic novel, the modern re-evaluations and reinterpretations of the 19th century. I'm also interested in historical fashion, especially the 19th century fashion, so costume movies. I like the musical theater. So these are all the courses I teach at the Institute, and if you get interested, you are very strongly invited to come to my courses next year. They are some of the elective courses. I'm interested in painting and arts. So I also teach a kind of introduction course to the history of British art, and these are some of the subjects that we will be discussing here during this semester. So that's the housekeeping. If you need anything else, as I said, you can come to my office hours. You can always drop me an email if you have any problems. If you have technical problems with the enrollment to the Moodle group, the person to contact is Professor Zbigniew Morzejko from the Institute. But if you wish, you can just drop me an email. I'll try to help you the best I can. So that's the housekeeping, and let's now move to the lecture proper. So let's begin. So that's the first slide, this beautiful image of nature with some mountains, with water, with green vegetation, the trees and plants. You can imagine there are some animals in the water, or maybe some birds in the trees or other animals. And of course, what nature is, it's the world around us, the world that was not created by humans, that has existed before humans and could exist without them. That's the physical, material world, that's the universe, the stars and everything that you can imagine that was not made by people. So that's the basic difference between the exact science, including the natural sciences, and humanities. Exact sciences such as mathematics, physics, chemistry, the natural sciences, biology, they do not need humans, they do not need people, perhaps only to study them, to understand them. What humans can do is to discover the laws of physics, to discover the principles of mathematics or astronomy or anything else, just to understand the world. But they cannot really change it, because it ceases to be nature. It's actually tampered with by the humans. As I said, physical, material world or universe. And this brings us to the concept of scale and the nature as we know it, the nature of classical physics, of biology, situates itself in this kind of middle scale, the bioscale, the macro scale. This is the world that we are accustomed to, that we as the species evolved to live in. But if we take a different perspective, a different lens, we can start seeing a completely different scale for which the laws of classical physics do not apply. So the cosmos scale of the galaxies and the universe and the stars, and the scale ruled by relativist physics, so a completely different set of rules. And also the microscale of atoms and particles, ruled over by the quantum physics. So again, different rules. We are not going to talk about it. We are going to focus on the macro and bio scale, but having this sort of perspective of either something infinitely great or something infinitely small gives you an added layer. Also a cultural layer, if you think about it. There is this very famous quotation from the philosopher Immanuel Kant, and here you have it: two things awe me most, the starry sky above me and the moral law within me. So the starry sky, the universe, the immense scale and majesty of the stars and the galaxies, it can influence humans, even in this sort of spiritual sense, to give them the sense of awe, the sense of wonder, the sense of mystery, and also the sense of the human's own smallness against the vastness of the universe. But there is the second part of reality, humanities. So everything that was made by humans, that would not exist without humans. So all the fields of human inquiry that study humans, that study human behavior. Everything that humans created in terms of society, in terms of politics and history, and the study of the human mind in psychology, and also the study of human expression through culture, expression through thinking, philosophy, and one of such expressions is what Immanuel Kant calls the moral law within me, which makes me again in awe, which according to him can create a sense of wonder and in this case rather a feeling of greatness, a feeling of being the master of nature rather than being dwarfed by it completely. So humans are part of nature. Humans begin lives regardless of their own volition. So nobody has anything to say about whether or not they will be born. Our beginnings in the world, we do not remember them, perhaps for the better, but of course all humans living today and all humans in history were born. Humans are social creatures. They are similar to great apes, so evolution. We have common ancestors with great apes. It doesn't really mean, as some critics of the evolution theory say, that humans evolved from the great apes. So we are the descendants of gorillas and chimpanzees and bonobos. No, we are not. We just have a very, very distant common ancestor that wasn't either a human being or an ape, but a common ancestor. But then again, when exactly did it start? Who was the last animal and the first human? These are the questions that sometimes people ask, and which cannot be simply answered. If you would like to compare it with some other similar question, when do you become an adult? Is it exactly on your 18th birthday, or does it happen in stages? Are there any important moments that you have to pass to become an adult? Are they the same for everybody? Is there one way to be an adult person? I hope you are all adults here. If not, you will soon be, or soon enough. But do you remember the day when you ceased to be an adolescent, or when you ceased to be a child and became an adolescent? And then when you ceased to be an adolescent and became an adult? That's the same with human evolution. It happens so slowly that most people do not do not perceive it when it's happening. Another very important thing about humans are that human beings are social. So they basically exist in relations to other humans. But they also try to understand nature, they try to understand their own place within nature, and whatever that entails, usually rights and obligations. And this gave the development for the whole variety of expressions of the human mind. Science, philosophy, religion, morality, these things have been developing since antiquity or prehistory. They have existed for as long as humans have existed. So what we have is at the very beginning of the existence of humans, this connection between nature and culture. So we have some scholars, some scientists trying to understand nature. So we have the beginning of social sciences, mostly in the 19th century. This is something that happens as the result of the Enlightenment in the history of European culture. And here you have some important names of natural scientists, so like Auguste Comte, the French philosopher, who postulated that science is based on observation of natural phenomena and is the only source of true knowledge. So you cannot know something that you cannot observe. We can discuss that. Is it true? Is it true about all aspects of humanities? What about the, let's say, non-material aspects of humanities? This is something to start with, perhaps a little. Then we have perhaps the most important natural scientist of the 19th century, the Victorian biologist Charles Darwin, the author of several very influential works, especially on the origin of species and the descent of man. So he is the author of the theory of evolution, which means that basically all living organisms, including humans, have evolved gradually over time by means of natural selection. So basically that nature, by definition, it's a law of nature, it evolves towards the better of the species and, let's say, nature itself, not towards the better of each individual organism. That's an important aspect to notice here. But here we have those natural sciences and the entanglement. As you can see, when people start doing science, they start doing philosophy at the same time. So we will rather rarely venture before the 19th century, perhaps in a few examples, because the 19th century was the Industrial Revolution, started in the 18th, but it really started to be visible everywhere in the 19th century. And then the 20th century with all its problems and the legacy of new science developments like the quantum theory and the theory of relativity, which I mentioned already in the 20th century. So that's one reason to concentrate only on the macro level, because the matter exists in this level. We have some very deeply running questions connecting nature and culture, or nature and human perception. So the questions of the development and the understanding of the complex structures and organs built over time through evolution in human bodies, like the brains, the sensors, the receptors. Actually, if you think about it, they are built of the same elementary particles as everything in nature and everything in the world. The concept of perception of the reality by the brain. Is it real? Do our senses deceive us? Material objects and non-material emotions. Are emotions real or only something that you can actually touch? There is the discussion, the juxtaposition of objective reality versus subjective perception, which can be very similar across human species, but some details may differ. Like we have this image of an apple here. Probably everybody looking at it would agree it's an apple, especially if you were raised or if you live in a culture that knows this kind of fruit. If you spent your entire life somewhere, I don't know, on a tropical desert island where apples do not grow, you may probably recognize it as some kind of fruit, but you couldn't name it. Then you see the color, the shape, the texture of this object. Probably most of you would agree it's red. Except for some people with some, let's say, irregularities of sight. There are colorblind people who do not see the red color, but they can still identify it as an apple. Also, the exact shade of the color red that you can see may differ from one person to another, but it's not a difference large enough or important enough to preclude communication. We can agree on some things. If you know this fruit, you can agree it's edible. Perhaps for most people, it would be true it's tasty. But then again, the details, the particulars of perception can vary from one person to another. And even more so, the perception of non-material things, so not objects, but concepts or emotions, which is an even more difficult and complex subject, which is quite crucial for human interaction. So what we have here is this very basic discrepancy between nature and culture. So, if you're interested, you can just leave the English Institute and English Philology right now and go study science, go study biology, go study quantum theory and physics and whatever else. And perhaps at some point in your life you'll get interested in these things. But for this semester, for the time being, we are going to focus on one most important thing. And this is human social life. And see you in a moment. So we are going to focus on human social life and culture. Then we might ask ourselves the question, what is culture? What is the definition of culture? And let me give you the first definition from Edward B. Taylor, a 19th century anthropologist, so again a Victorian scholar, from his book entitled Primitive Culture from 1871. And this is what he wrote about culture. Culture or civilization, taken in its wide ethnographic sense, is that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. So what we have here are some interesting aspects. First of all, he apparently sees culture and civilization as synonyms, as two words that mean basically the same. Then he says he's going to take the ethnographic sense. Ethnographic meaning referring to human social behavior within one particular type of culture. So it could be the British culture, or the European culture, or Native American culture. So he doesn't want to compare different cultures, but try to define any culture in its own right. So a complex whole, so something that is made of different parts, which include knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. So we have basically different aspects of human social behavior. Knowledge, science, belief, meaning religious belief, for example, or any other acquired ideas. Art, artistic expression, morality, the law, the legal relations and the codification of human behavior. Custom, so different rules of conduct, or any other similar activities acquired by man. Of course, this is a Victorian scientist, so of course he doesn't talk about people, he doesn't talk about human beings, or even men and women, he just talks about the man to mean humans. We have to put up with that, really. If we study 19th century, this was the time when women were not accepted, even as students at the university, not to say something about being university lecturers or professors. So, yes, you have to basically bear it and make a mental note that he means people when he says men, like Edward Taylor or any other Victorian scholar. This will be all over the place, as you will see. So humans as members of society. So culture or civilization is created not really by individual people, but people as members of a society, people in interaction with each other. So what we have here is this very early 19th century definition of culture. And he even doesn't make a distinction between culture and civilization, which is now more or less taken for granted. And contemporary scholars usually make a distinction. We'll talk about it in a little moment. Before we do that, let's look at a page from a dictionary, Merriam-Webster dictionary, with the definitions of culture, what culture can mean. So, let's say a modern, contemporary vision of such a definition. As you can see, there are at least 3 larger sections and they are further subdivided. So nowadays the definition is much more precise and it means more than this short definition given by Edward B. Taylor. So the first one is point 1a, the customary beliefs, social forms and material traits of a racial, religious or social group, also the characteristic features of everyday existence, such as diversions or the way of life shared by people in a place or time. For example, popular culture or southern culture. So then again we have those social behaviors, beliefs, material traits of different groups, so social behavior and features of everyday existence, such as customs, such as popular entertainments, popular leisure activities. Then, the second aspect of this definition: the set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or organization. For example, a corporate culture. So it can be any group. It could be an institution, like a university. You may say that universities create their own culture, or a school, or a workplace, or a political party. They all group people, usually according to some goals, values, practices, and you may say they create a kind of culture. Next one, the set of values, conventions, and social practices associated with a particular field, activity, or societal characteristic. For example, the effect of computers on print culture. So, print culture or online culture. So, some aspect of human behavior, usually human behavior shared by a group. It could be connected to some activity, like the use of computers, for example, or the use of printed books. Then, the integrated pattern of human knowledge, belief, and behavior that depends upon the capacity for learning and transmitting knowledge to succeeding generations. So, this is something important, something that we are going to discuss slightly more today in a while. Culture needs to be learned. Culture also has the capacity of being transmitted. This is not something that you are born with. If you are born with it, it's nature, it's an instinct. Nobody needs to teach people how to eat or how to sleep. They may have problems with it, deriving from some, illness or something, but it's an inborn thing. It's not part of culture, it's part of nature. But if you need to learn it, and if you can teach it to another person, it's definitely culture. Then, this is all like the first meaning of culture, according to Merriam-Webster dictionary. Then we have the second meaning of the word. For example, enlightenment and excellence of taste acquired by intellectual and aesthetic training. Or acquaintance with a taste in fine arts, humanities, and broad aspects of science, as distinguished from vocational and technical skills. A person of culture. Here we have an example. A person of culture. So a person of education, sophisticated taste, resulting from training, intellectual and aesthetic training. So this is again something that has been passed through generations, like the appreciation of high status forms of cultural expression, of artistic expression. So you can talk about different styles of culture, or even more generally as the appreciation of those high status things as a mark of, let's say, the social position of the person who displays them. We will talk about different layers of culture, and of course popular culture is just as good and just as valid as the so-called high culture, but the word is sometimes used in this sense as well. And the third one is really not connected with humans. The act or process of cultivating living material, such as bacteria or viruses, in prepared nutrient media, also the product of such cultivation. So you can talk about bacteria culture, or virus culture, or mushroom culture. It's not about the ability of bacteria to appreciate classical music or high literature. It's about growth and cultivation of the living material, very often by humans. But what it shares with other meanings of culture is the process of cultivation. So culture is all about growth, about transmission, about cultivation. Of course, in the sense that we will find interesting in this course, I mean human culture, and I mean culture as part of social behavior of humans. And if we look at the next slide, culture is all-encompassing, which means it has very many different aspects that include lots of different activities. So art, music, sport, ritual, religion, tool usage, cooking, shelter like housing, architecture, clothing, political organizations, social institutions, philosophy, literature. If you look at the image on the slide, you have more of that. You have language, medical care, you have child rearing methods, food, folk art, celebration, jokes, manners, clothes, working schedules. These things are all connected to culture because they are all aspects of human social behavior. If we look at some more definitions from 20th century scholars, we can find some more precise notions. Like here we have a definition from 1948 by Melville Herskovits. Culture is the man-made part of the environment. So whatever humans made, it's culture. The rest is nature. A very famous and influential scholar, Margaret Mead, wrote, "Culture is the total shared learned behavior or of a society or a subgroup." So again, shared learned behavior performed in a group. And another very influential culture scholar, Clifford James Geertz, culture is a historically transmitted pattern of meanings embodied in symbols. So again, it is a transmitted pattern of meanings, so it is learned and shared even over time, so historically transmitted. You do not have to learn it from, let's say, your parents or the previous generation. You can learn it from books written by people who lived very long time ago, or from works of art. Because, note again, culture is embodied in symbols. So the way that culture permeates itself, that it is transmitted, is through symbols. This is something very important that we'll definitely return to later on. Let's now look at the question of culture versus civilization. As you remember, for early scholars such as Edward B. Taylor, this was basically the same thing. Culture or civilization. This is the shared human behavior. But nowadays, I think the scholars are more precise, and the distinction between culture and civilization is really the distinction between, let's say, material and non-material aspects of human group behavior. Not 100% accurate, but let's see. So culture answers the question, tries to answer the question what we are as humans, as members of a given group. It deals with things such as philosophy, morality, literature, customs, art, so expressions of human condition, of human perception, of human consciousness. So what we are. Civilization, on the other hand, tries to answer the question of what we possess, what we have. For example, the infrastructure, technology, the law, social arrangements. So all the things that make life easier, that make life more comfortable. And if you look at culture, it very rarely makes life easier. In fact, very often it makes life more difficult, but it tries to look for meaning. It tries to look for representation, for expression, ultimately trying to make sense of the world. Civilization is just the technology, and also some sort of social technology, as the law, as, I don't know, the working arrangements, political organizations that make life more structured. But civilization generally is not interested in finding meaning, but culture is. Therefore, if you think about it, culture can exist and grow without civilization, but civilization cannot exist without culture, or at least it cannot survive for long without culture. So if we have technology without the social, philosophical, moral, artistic aspects to it, this technology will not be very useful, because what do you use it for, really? The question which arises now is which one was first, culture or civilization? And if we look at prehistory, that's what we find. We find the very, very first tools made by very early humans, even before the time of the modern Homo sapiens. We have the first tools made by those pre-human forms. And we have the first examples of art, like the cave paintings, or the very first sculptures. Which one was first? Was it culture or civilization? And how do we deal with that? And we'll definitely talk about it later on. So let's take a little break. So now we might ask ourselves the question of what motivates human actions. Why do people create culture? Why do people develop civilization? And this is again something that has perplexed scholars ever since antiquity, if you think about that. Is this the fulfillment of a need? Is there some sort of purpose in human behavior? Why do people basically bother creating culture? What is the motivator here? And some ideas can be found in philosophy again. For example, the idea that it is pleasure that motivates people. So we have the ancient philosopher Aristippus of Cyrene, who developed the idea of hedonism, that is the pursuit of pleasure. And he believed that people are basically motivated by looking for pleasure. They want something that is pleasant, usually to the senses, but also to the intellect, something that is pleasant, and they avoid something that they find unpleasant. So just as simple as that. For later scholars, this wasn't really something they believed was the underlying cause of all culture. So, for example, the philosophers of utilitarianism, very popular in the 19th century, from the Enlightenment onwards, so from later 18th century to the 19th century. They believed such a motivator was usefulness rather than pleasure. So people do things which they perceive to be useful, to be just worth their effort. So we have scholars, philosophers such as Jeremy Bentham or John Stuart Mill, who write about the usefulness aspect of human behavior, especially group behavior. So the greatest possible happiness of the greatest possible number. That's the motivator. People want to do something, especially if it's difficult, if it's time consuming and costly and ultimately unpleasant, especially while it's being done before it's ready. They could be motivated by usefulness. Then in the 20th century, we have the development of psychology. We'll definitely talk about the development of psychoanalysis and Sigmund Freud. And for the psychoanalysis, this was the unconscious that motivates people. The unconscious, the part of the human psychology they are not even aware of. So something that is pre-cultural, something that is, you might say, at the animal level, the instincts, the drives. This is something that people have and they sometimes are not even fully aware of having. This was the work of Sigmund Freud, now contested by modern psychology, but still very important, at least historically. Then we have the followers, the scholars who are influenced by Freud. We'll talk about them later on. But for example, Alfred Adler, who believed that such a motivator was inferiority complex. People compete with other people. They just want to be better. They want to feel better than other people, and this is what motivates them. There was another theory called hormic psychology, developed by William McDougall, who believed that people are born with natural psychological dispositions. So some feelings, some deep emotions are inborn. So it's not only culture, that there is a part of nature in human psychology. Nature which is represented by such emotions as fear, revulsion, wonder, anger, domination, submission, tenderness. So in fact, some of the behaviors, either individual or social, that humans share with other animals. If we think of fear, this is something that other animals fear as well. If you are faced with danger, you react with fear or revulsion. If you are, for example, faced with some spoiled food, animals recognize spoiled food. So you may say they feel revulsion. Also, domination and submission, the development of hierarchies in social animals, such as apes or other social animals. This goes before the development of humanity. So is this something that motivates humans as well? Anger. but also tenderness, especially tenderness towards the young. This is something that animals definitely, even very fierce predators, feel as well. Or is it all just basic stimulus and response? So behaviorism. People react to whatever they are faced with. So if we talk about the beginnings of culture or the groundwork of culture, we basically start talking about human psychology. Whatever is natural in human psychology, if anything, whatever is conscious or unconscious, and whatever motivates people to action. An interesting thing, that something I would like to point out to you very early on, especially concerning psychoanalysis and Sigmund Freud, and why he is criticized. One of the reasons is that those early psychologists basically worked with troubled people, with people with some sort of mental disorders, with some sort of severe problems that made life very difficult for them. So they basically studied their patients who wouldn't contact them if they didn't have a serious problem. Later in the 20th century, we have the development of humanist psychology, that is, the studying of the psyche of mentally healthy, mature, and very often successful individuals. So not children. It's still important for the psychologist, but not exactly the most important thing, and not patients. It could be the study of the healthy and well-adjusted psychology of a mature individual. And this is something that was mostly developed by a very influential psychologist, still influential today, and someone that you may remember perhaps from your high school or from your earlier readings, Abraham H. Maslow. He developed a very famous pyramid of needs, the hierarchy of needs. So he tried to answer the question what motivates people and how it works. And basically he came up with this kind of triangular pyramid-like structure of needs. He worked on it for a better part of his life. This is the early version, the version that's still most popular and most influential, with 5 tiers. And as you can see, the basic tier is the physiological needs, which are named as breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, and excretion, which means basic biological needs for the organism to function. I would say breathing, food, water, these are the basic things. Homeostasis is the feeling of health, basically, the kind of balance, internal balance. Excretion is the elimination of waste, basically going to the toilet, let's put it this way. Sleep absolutely falls into this category of basic physiological needs. Why sex is here is not really the complex mating arrangements, but what he understood by sex at this level is the basic sexual drive, the basic attraction that the vast majority of people, except for some asexual people, feel during their life as a natural, as a biological need, really, rather than some sort of social behavior. This could be argued, but that's how he saw it, as you can see in the 1940s. But what definitely stood the test of time is that this is the level of basic biological functions. So before you do anything else, you need to breathe, and you need to sleep, and you need to eat and drink. That's and you need to be basically able to continue your physical existence. That's it. Physiological needs necessary for survival. The next level, the next tier is safety. The needs for safety. So security of body, employment, resources, morality, the family, health, and property. This is, again, some of the aspects of this could be argued perhaps, but what it all boils down to is the basic safety and security. So something that allows the person to function in their own society. So the resources such as clothes, such as a roof over your head, warmth, health, also the money in modern society, of course, it would be the money, so it would be employment. It would be some basic property, not luxury items, but basic things. And also some sort of human resources, basic human resources, to have some people on whom you can depend. It could be the family, it could be the immediate group, social group that you can hope would help you in times of need. That's probably why morality is mentioned here in the safety tier, because this is just the way to ensure that you can trust people, that you can actually begin the social interaction. So once your physiological, basic biological needs are met and you have the means of survival, the next tier is to make it possible for you materially and emotionally to engage in interactions with other humans. And this brings us to tier 3, love and belonging. So the social needs, friendship, family, sexual intimacy, so looking for a life partner, looking for a group of people with whom you identify, with whom you feel comfortable, whom you can trust. It could be your family group, it could be your social group, it could be close friends. So it's really moving from biological, material needs to more psychological needs. And in Maslow's hierarchy, the needs at the lower tier need to be fulfilled before you can move to the higher tier. So once you are, let's say, breathing and equipped with basic needs like clothes and perhaps a home and basic social structures to live in, you can really invest emotionally in interactions with other people. This leads us to tier 4, the needs of esteem. It could be self-esteem, confidence, the feeling of achievement, respect of others, and respect by others. This is a very important thing. So to be a happy, realized human being, humans need to be confident, need to be glad really and happy in their social roles. They need to respect other people and to be respected by them. This is something very important. This is something you cannot really give yourself, the respect and the feeling of achievement, because this is the appreciation that comes from other people. The other people in your group, the people you care about, or the society at large. But this is something that humans cannot really give themselves, but they can achieve it through their actions and be reassured in the confidence and self-esteem by other people. And this leads us to the fifth and highest tier in the initial hierarchy of needs by Maslow, which he called self-actualization, which includes all the higher emotional, intellectual, possibly spiritual needs of morality, creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, lack of prejudice, acceptance of facts. So here we have morality not in the sense from the second tier, like the basic structure of society and the basic possibility of trusting other people, but a more complex system of values, of goals, of aspirations. We have creativity here, we have problem solving at a higher level, we have more adjusted social behavior like the acceptance of facts, lack of prejudice, more open social behavior rather than very insular, centered on your immediate family, on your immediate group adherence. And this is the way that Maslow actually invented his pyramid of needs initially. Then he started tampering with it, and of course his followers started playing with this whole idea, like what needs need to be met first, because before you can move to higher levels. Here you can see a kind of humorous take on this, that even before your physiological needs, you need Wi-Fi, and before the Wi-Fi you need a battery or some sort of electricity, perhaps. Perhaps for the modern people that's even more important. That would go probably in safety and security rather than physiological, or even more basic than physiological needs. But of course some aspects of these hierarchies can be played with. I would like to show you another version of Maslow's pyramid, the one that he developed shortly before his death. And as you can see, it's the same structure with the same tiers, but the last tier, the highest one, self-actualization, is actually further sliced into smaller sections. So altogether we have the first four are the same. So physiological, safety, love and belonging, so those social needs, esteem, and they are called deficiency motivators. So if people do not have enough of these things, they will do everything to obtain them. Like if you don't have enough food, you will definitely try to find anything edible. And if you do not feel safe, you will do anything in your power to ensure greater safety for yourself. The same apparently for the basic social needs of belonging and esteem. So you want to have some people, perhaps even one person is enough in some cases, with whom to form a close relationship, and then you want some sort of social interaction that will strengthen your self-esteem and confidence. So that's what we have. He makes a further division of the esteem, so level 4, into lower version: respect from others, recognition, status, reputation, fame, and the higher version, so self-esteem, confidence, competence, and independence. So basically, once you are reassured by your social circle, you start to develop your own independent self-esteem. And this brings us to the highest level in the initial pyramid, so the self-actualization thing, which is further subdivided into 4 more tiers. So rather than call everything self-actualization, it's developed into cognition, aesthetics, self-actualization, and self-transcendence. And these are not deficiency motivators. You can live without them, but of course, the more you have of them, the more you feel happy, fulfilled, and basically they are the indications of emotional and psychological growth. So cognition is knowledge, this is curiosity, this is intelligence, the development of meaning and self-awareness. So like a very basic step towards self-actualization. Then we have aesthetics, so the appreciation of beauty, of art, the feeling of balance, the feeling of contemplation. Self-actualization proper is connected with personal growth, self-fulfillment, realization of one's potential, and seeking peak experiences. Peak experiences means like ultimate moments of achievement. When you have achieved something which you perceive very important, like, I don't know, completing an MA maybe. This could be a peak experience for some. You feel like a boost of this self-actualization, which is very positive for your psychological growth. And the very peak here in this upgraded version is called self-transcendence, and it has been analyzed as trying to look beyond the human condition, trying to find some sort of spiritual meaning, in a religious sense, but not necessarily in a religious sense. It could be, for example, helping others to self-actualize, altruism, and basically looking beyond your immediate social circle and even your larger social circle to help humanity, to put it in a vast way. So this is it about the motivators, and now let's talk about how culture is transmitted. So see you in a moment. The last set of slides will be about cultural transmission, and the most important, the basic assumption here is that culture is not innate. It must be learned. So, of course, as you can see by now, hopefully, many of the aspects of human life are based in nature, but some of them, and especially the social expressions of behaviors related to those natural needs, are based in nurture or in cultural transmission, in learning. So culture must be learned through social interaction. This process is called enculturation. Enculturation means introducing new members, usually children, to a given culture. So there are some things which are inborn, which are natural, which are instinctive. There are the things related to those physiological needs from the bottom level of Maslow's pyramid of needs. So, of course, the need of food, the need of warmth, shelter, sleep, waste elimination, mating, pregnancy and childbirth are also natural processes that occur not only in humans, and occur sometimes without human volition. They would happen even if humans did not want it. If you are pregnant, you cannot just will yourself to not be pregnant, or if you are sleepy, you cannot just convince yourself in your mind that you do not need to sleep. Eventually you will just fall over. You can pretend, or you can try to distract yourself, but eventually these are the things that cannot be overcome by willpower. But as you can see here on the slide, there are the cultural expressions of those needs. So of course the need for food is inborn, but what you eat, how you eat, and the processes of cooking, the whole notion of regional or national cuisine, these are purely cultural arrangements. The same for warmth and shelter. We need some sort of warmth and shelter, especially in colder climates. But what exactly people use for this, what kind of clothing, what kind of housing, this is all cultural. Even things like waste elimination. Of course, we need to eliminate waste products from our bodies. But even if you compare different types of toilets around the world, they are not identical. They are infused by culture. Even sleep, the kind of beds, the kinds of sleeping arrangements, it's all reflected of the state of culture and civilization. For example, the invention of electricity, the popularization of electrical lighting changed dramatically the sleep patterns of people in the areas of the world which had it. The same. Mating and sexual drive are natural functions, but sexual morality, marriage, and also child-rearing practices as a cultural response to pregnancy and childbirth. So all the cultural baggage that these natural functions carry. And what about the appreciation of non-material things, such as the concepts of beauty, the concepts of love, the concepts of knowledge? Are they a response to some deeply embedded natural need, something instinctive and biological, or are they functions of culture, of social interaction and enculturation? These are the questions that we do not really know definite answers to. You may try to answer these questions for yourself, but generally much of the underlying biology and genetics and the natural aspects of human body expressed through human behavior are quite mysterious to the science right now. But we know quite a lot about learning culture and how people learn. So first of all, there are different kinds of learning which result in enculturation, that is, sharing experiences, values, memories, beliefs, symbols. You can learn through situational learning, either by individual experience. For example, if you touch fire once, you will very likely not try to touch fire again. Or through social learning, learning from other members of the group. You can learn through observation. So observational learning, just observing other people doing things. It can be conscious, it can be actually being instructed by other people in some sort of skills, or unconscious. This is what young children do a lot. They just observe all the time. They just observe their parents and other members of the group, and they learn through observational learning without even being fully aware of this. Of course, what is particularly interesting to us today is cultural learning, that is, learning based on human capacity to think symbolically. The symbols, as you remember, are very useful psychological tools in transmission of culture, in transmission of certain abstract ideas. A special kind of symbols, something that is probably quite well known to you, are memes. Memes, that is, basic units of culture, something that is reproduced. So they are not only funny pictures that you can find on the internet. The idea of a meme was introduced by evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins in his book The Selfish Gene. And just as the genes are small units, minimal units of genetic, biological information, so memes, he postulated, are minimal units of cultural information. So according to his idea, cultural traits are reproduced in a way similar to biological traits, like genes or viruses. So you can even talk about something going viral and cultural epidemiology. So people accepting, especially when something catches the attention of large groups of people in quick succession. So some new ideas, some concepts, some symbols can become viral, so can be very quickly reproduced in large groups of people and, quote unquote, infect large groups of people. Another typical way of cultural transmission is imitation. Again, conscious or unconscious, observational learning, and any kind of learning very often invites imitation. Children very often play by make-believe games, so basically imitations, basically creating some sort of scenarios in which they recreate social situations and certain social behaviors. Of course, nothing is completely innocent and completely untouched by prejudice or so-called biases. That is the interference from already known parts of culture, aspects of culture, in the cultural transmission. There are very many biases, probably more than 50 different biases. We do not need to talk about them at this point. You may want to Google them and try to find. There are entire tables and lists of different biases and the way that people's understanding and cultural transmission are actually interfered by contaminated by what they already believe to be true. So, for example, just to give you a few examples, there may be content bias. So tasty recipes and effective tools, so something that is proven to be useful or attractive, will be easier to transmit culturally than, let's say, ineffective tools, the ones that are not believed to be very helpful. There is the context bias. For example, the obvious, the kind of basic idea of context bias is conformity. So imitating the behavior of the majority. If you are learning something new and you see or observe people doing it, most people are inclined to follow the example, to imitate the example of the majority. So if most people do it, it must be good. Most people would just follow the example without even questioning whether it is really good for them if the majority does it. Another thing is prestige bias, so imitating people respected as experts. This is what advertisements do all the time, especially those of some medical content. They will dress an actor in clothes resembling doctors' clothes and just call them an expert, and if such an expert, who is not even a real medical doctor, or perhaps he is an expert in some other field, but just cast in the role of somebody who knows, who tries to convince the potential buyer that this product, like, I don't know, toothpaste or some vitamin pills or something like that, we tend to believe experts. So if we can have a real expert, that's the best. But even a pretend expert, somebody just dressed up as a scientist or a medical doctor, could be enough to convince very many potential buyers. So that's a very important aspect of culture. Human can pass on learned knowledge and skills to other humans. So this is something very, very basic about culture. You are not born with it, but you can learn it, and you can then, when you know it, teach it to others. Any knowledge, any skill can be reproduced by other humans. And here you have some images of animals doing tricks, and animals that have been taught by humans to perform certain actions, like, I don't know, jumping, or even here you have a bear riding a bicycle. Of course, the bear didn't learn it from the mother bear or from some innate instinct, but was taught by some human trainer. But the difference between animals and humans in this respect is that animals, with a very, very few exceptions, will not pass the learned knowledge to other animals, like to their children maybe, or to just other animals. If they learn something useful, they almost never have the capacity of transmitting the learned knowledge further. So whether they learn something from humans, okay, they can, perhaps this bear will be able to ride a bicycle until the end of their life, but will not be able to teach any other bear or any other animal, or human for that matter, to ride a bicycle. The same for the dog jumping and animals doing any other learned behaviors. For humans, absolutely, this is what humans do. This is for many scholars what actually makes us human. Humans must learn from other humans, especially more complex skills such as writing or driving a car or playing a musical instrument. You need instruction. So it could be an actual teacher who would accompany you and assist you in your learning. It could be a book. It could be, I don't know, a film, a recorded film, and you just follow some instructions, or you follow some line of thought. But the basic assumption is that humans must learn from other humans, because culture is not inborn. It is, however, some more things. It has some other traits which are very characteristic and which make it culture. So, for example, culture is shared. It means it refers to individuals as members of groups. It's very difficult and not very practical to have your own personal culture. And even some people, like, let's say, the painter and poet William Blake, who developed a very difficult, very complex private mythology, his own system of symbols and creatures of fantasy, he was still inclined to share his ideas through poetry, through painting, so try to transmit it to other people. So culture is shared. Culture must be shared. Even if you come up with something, if you want it to become part of culture, you need to share it. Then culture is integrated. It means culture is a whole. You cannot take an element out of context. But if you take anything, we'll talk about it when we talk about material culture, and any element of a culture is an emissary of this culture, like an ambassador. It represents the culture as a whole. If we take a table, if we take a computer, if we take any historical object, something that an archaeologist perhaps might find, or something which just was lost and suddenly rediscovered, it represents the culture that produced it. And the way to understand it is actually the way to understand the culture that produced it, because culture is integrated. Then culture is patterned. So all the elements of culture are interrelated. Beliefs, values, customs, institutions, also artifacts, they are all interrelated. So they are true not only in terms of technology, they fall into kind of one whole in terms of technology, but also in terms of values, beliefs, customs. So that's the way that a vast majority of objects found today speak of capitalism, because they were produced under capitalism. So it's not only the technology, it's also the values and belief systems. Then, culture is selective. It means every culture represents a limited choice of human behavior patterns. It means that the possibilities, the potentialities of human behavior are nearly endless. So people can, for example, eat lots of different things. They can behave in a very broad variety of ways. They can invent endless forms of expression. They can invent practically endless forms of customs and rituals and belief systems and the systems of organization of the society. But each culture just chooses the elements that fit it best. So, there will be one system of government at a time, even though there are many different systems of government in the world. There will be one, let's say, dominant way of various social behaviors, like marriage. We'll talk about it when we get to it, but there are very different possible ways of arranging the married life for people. But each culture chooses the type of relations that fit its best. And the last thing, which is very important, culture is ethnocentric. It means every group tends to view its own culture as the best and judge the behavior of different groups by one's own standards. It means that it is a kind of bias. So even if we want to study a different culture, a culture we are not familiar with, we end up judging it and comparing it to our own culture. For good or bad. It's not necessarily something that is bad, but it kind of clouds our view. Otherwise, if some scholars can move beyond it, it's called cultural relativism. So treating each culture in its own right. So trying not to judge, trying not to compare the culture that you are unfamiliar with to the culture that you are familiar with. Of course, what we have here is the differences between the ideal culture, so how people believe they should behave, the ideas of dignity, respectability, decency, and the real cultures of what people actually do. And this is basically the kind of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation, because the ideals are usually very moral and very lofty, and the reality is just as reality would be. Then what we have is culture is dynamic. culture is subject to constant change. It rarely stays the same. People search for better ways to do things. Western culture, change is perceived as something good, as progress, development, modernization is a benefit. But if you think about it, it's not usually the benefit for everybody. It implies a cost for somebody else. Sometimes the change is spontaneous, it's voluntary, it's based on informal interaction. Sometimes it is actively sought, actively planned and directed, for example, by the government. So what humans need to do, like other animals of course, is to adapt to the changes in their environment in order to survive. Even the ancient philosopher Heraclitus noticed this. He said that everything flows, pantarei, it means like everything flows, everything changes. What we need to do is to accept it. And one way, a very popular way how culture changes is through the process of acculturation. Acculturation versus enculturation. Acculturation is modification of culture by adopting new cultural traits, or cultural assimilation or replacement of one set of traits by another. It could be the replacement of one technology by another. It could be something less material. It could be religion, ideology, language. Usually those material changes happen more quickly than the immaterial changes because there is some sort of tension between the maintenance of cultural distinctiveness, so special aspects of any given culture, and the positive relations with other ethnic groups, so the positive elements of change. And as you can see in this little table, what we have here are two possibilities. High cultural distinctiveness versus low cultural distinctiveness, and high inter-ethnic relations versus low inter-ethnic relations. So what we have is either the separation or marginalization of those new traits, so some sort of resistance, or if the inter-ethnic relations are high and the change is viewed as very positive, it is integration or assimilation of those new changes. So once again, the difference between acculturation and enculturation is enculturation, the beginning, the prefix en, like encode, encircle, means acceptance of new members to the culture. Acculturation, like accept, accumulate, is the modification and assimilation of new traits to the culture. So here you have one image showing a group of children, and the other image showing people of different ethnic origin. Here actually in front of a German flag, so probably creating one society, in this case the society of citizens of the state of Germany, coming from different places with different cultural legacies, with different cultural baggage. So here is acculturation, the modification of culture, versus enculturation, that is the instruction of children in their own culture, the social transmission of the native culture. Okay, so that's it for this week. See you next week. Thank you.